With all of the new at the Oklahoma Sooners, there was a lot of intrigue surrounding their spring game, and it certainly did not disappoint. Today, I just finished my rewatch of the spring game. We need to talk about the takeaways I have from it and some other points. Before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no. Are you excited about the Oklahoma Sooners' future after the spring game? And let me know what you thought. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, like and comment down below because those interactions, though seemingly small, are incredibly impactful to content creators such as myself in both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said, let's hop right into this. And Brent Venables asked Sooner Nation to pack the palace, and pack the palace they did. That was one of the coolest things I've seen in the entirety of spring games and spring practices, anything like that. Seeing 75,000 people pack those stands for not only Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners spring game, but also to see Baker Mayfield have his statue unveiled. It was really cool for me to get to see, and I think it really highlights the excitement that Oklahoma has not only about their former players, but also about the future that their program is trending in. And that excitement was justified by what we saw on the field, because for all the new Oklahoma has, they looked pretty solid in this spring game, and there's several different takeaways I have. And when we're starting on this list of takeaways, the first thing I can talk about is the quarterback position in Dillon Gabriel, and he had command of the offense. There was a play ending the first quarter when he threw the touchdown pass to Marvin Mims that I thought was a great example of the command he has of this offense and the command he has in understanding where the ball needs to go. Because if you watch that play back, Marvin Mims was uncovered from the jump, and it was a single high safety look. Reading that showed it was zone coverage, and Dillon Gabriel instantly knew there were two possibilities for who was going to pick up Marvin Mims. It was either going to be A, a linebacker, or B, that single high safety was going to come over top and take away that throw over the middle. Come to find out, the single high safety took advantage of the corner breaking on the underneath route and went to go cover Theo Weiss on the fade, leaving Marvin Mims one-on-one with a linebacker. Dillon Gabriel had already gathered what those possibilities were before the ball was snapped, and at the point where the ball was snapped, he looked to his right, started his progressions there, but he knew where he had an advantageous matchup if that safety rotated, and the second he saw that safety rotate, boom, he connected with Marvin Mims for an easy touchdown. That, in such a short time at the Oklahoma Sooners, is incredibly impressive and really highlights one of the reasons why I've been so high on Dillon Gabriel. We can talk about everything he brings to the table in terms of skill set, that he's a dual threat guy, that he uses his legs not only to hurt a defense in the rushing category, but also to keep a defense honest. And what I mean when I say that is when he's running, his eyes are upfield. He's using his legs as an extension of the passing game, and he's not afraid to take advantage of an open lane, but he's also not going to try and bail instantly. He wants to throw the ball and hurt a defense that way, which is really what you love to see out of these dual threat guys. But ultimately, the one thing that I kept talking about with Dillon Gabriel, and the reason why I knew or had a great feeling that this wouldn't be a long feeling out process, is because of his prior experience with Jeff Lebby and the understanding of what Jeff Lebby wants to do, how to be successful in Jeff Lebby's system, and that's why I thought it was a perfect marriage when Oklahoma ended up going out and getting Dillon Gabriel. And everything I saw from the spring game just is going to have his confidence sky high, and it should. He was in complete command of the offense, and I think he's going to have a really solid season. Great quarterback pickup for the Oklahoma Sooners, and if you're a Sooners fan, you have to be very confident in who your starter is. And even outside of that, Evers has a lot of growing to do, but he showed you the arm talent, and it's arm talent that's exciting to say the least. Bowens continues to grow. Ralph Rucker is there, but Dillon Gabriel has got such an impressive control over this offense, even though he's only been on campus for a few months, and I think it all stems back to that past familiarity with Jeff Lebby. But another area that really stood out to me was the running back depth, and there are a lot of different names we can talk about, but the overarching point I can make is that the running back depth is totally opposite what it was a year ago for the Sooners. There are several names to watch: Eric Gray, Marcus Major, Tawee Walker, but Javonte Barnes, I think, is a name to really be excited about. Not that you shouldn't be excited about the rest of them, but for a true freshman to be where he is and the burst he has, I think he's going to be utilized heavily in this Oklahoma offense, and I think it's going to be a really interesting season to see what he's able to do. But when you look at the totality of circumstances in that running back room, there are so many different names to be excited about, and that's something that I think really hurt Oklahoma's offense a year ago, was the lack of that running back depth. Now you're sitting in a situation where not only are your wide receivers accounted for, in Theo Weiss, Drake Stoops, Marvin Mims, just with those three right there, you feel very confident. But we're going to talk about a freshman wide receiver who, goodness gracious, you need to keep an eye on. We'll get to that a bit later. Not only do you have all those weapons on the outside, but then at your running back, I mean, you have so many different options for Jeff Lebby to be able to utilize, and I think it creates a lot of opportunity, not just for Javonte Barnes, but for everybody in the room. Another area I want to talk about before I get into who that freshman wide receiver is, and all of you already know, it's Jaden Gibson, but before we get into Jaden Gibson, the offensive line for Oklahoma is in a much better position right now than it was a year ago. We obviously have to see how it ends up during the season, but from watching the spring game, I think, one, Schmitty coming back is something that's going to be an incredibly positive factor for the Sooners. I've talked about this before. We did that video highlighting my two favorite hires for the Sooners, and it was Todd Bates and Schmitty, with an honorable mention being Jeff Lebby. But I think that the offensive line is indicative of not only Bill Biedenbaugh's development, but also Schmitty's factor and what he brings to the table. So I think that's an area we need to keep an eye on. But finally, the last thing we'll say for the offense is that freshman Jaden Gibson, standing 6'5", and he caught that long touchdown pass, and that young man can go. You can't teach 6'5". You either have 6'5" or you don't have 6'5". And even if you're a green wide receiver, and what I mean when I say green is somebody who's young, who's got a ton of ability, but they need to be coached up, because there's a massive jump from the high school game to the collegiate game. Almost everybody comes in green. So if you're that guy, as long as you have an understanding of what you need to do to be successful in a red zone scenario and you're 6'5", you're going to be seeing the field in some capacity. And I think Jaden Gibson is a name that Oklahoma fans are going to exit the spring very excited about. And this was a name that was already generating excitement during the spring. So I think that right there was awesome to see. But on the defensive side, there's a lot to be excited about here as well. Look, whenever we're talking about Oklahoma's defense, and when we have been, I've always brought attention to the defensive front. One of the reasons, not only with the names that are still there, and there's a lot of intriguing talent still there, and a lot of intriguing talent that they got out the transfer portal, but the coaches Oklahoma nabbed for those positions. Chavez is a young guy, but I keep saying his name, and I hope you heed my warning. I think he's going to be a coach we need to keep an eye on, and Todd Bates is that dude. There is no questioning Todd Bates, and because of those two, and because of the talent in the room, I think there's a lot of upside. And Ethan Downs, to end that football game during Oklahoma's spring game, took over. I mean, he absolutely took over, and he showed a variety of moves, a variety of ways to get the job done. I think he's someone you have to be incredibly excited about. Marcus Stripling had himself a game. I saw Jeffrey Johnson wreaking havoc. I saw the linebackers making plays, and once again, much like I said with the offensive line, I saw several different linebackers making plays, which gives you the ability to have depth, which is going to be a necessary evil, especially with what Brent Venables wants to do with that defense. What I saw out of Oklahoma's defense only would breed confidence if I was an Oklahoma fan. From the defensive front, there was an aggression there that you love to see, especially when you look at who Oklahoma lost off that defensive front. Because whenever we're talking about the losses Oklahoma had, they had some really stellar players off that defensive front test the draft, and that test is going to be passed exponentially. Whenever we're talking Nick Bonito, who is one of the top pass rushers in the nation, exiting, there could be a question of, okay, well, we do like who we have in the room. We have a lot of talent in the room, but how exactly do we replace Nick Bonito? And now I think you're looking at the situation and you're still wondering, what are the stats going to look like? But you're much more comfortable having seen the spring game, and now you just got affirmation to what you had believed. Because Oklahoma fans believed that the talent was in that room, but now they just got the affirmation. And that's something I talked about in the intro. How cool it was to see 75,000 people pack into that stadium for Brent Venables' inaugural spring game. That right there was awesome to see, and it showed how excited the Oklahoma fan base is for their upcoming season, for the future and what it holds, and justifiably so. But the real justification for that excitement came when we actually got to watch the spring game, and you got to see how, even though it's only been a short amount of time since this new coaching staff has got here, There's a lot to be excited about for Oklahoma, and I'm really interested in what the Big 12 is going to look like, because a lot of national pundits have talked about Oklahoma falling off, and I just haven't ever really been able to figure out where they would fall off. From a coaching perspective, they got a lot of great hires, a lot of guys that know what it takes to win because of the buildings and the environments they've been in. From a talent perspective, sure, they lost some guys that are incredibly talented football players. Oklahoma fans will be the first to admit that to you. But just as I always say, the transfer portal is a pendulum, and Oklahoma exercised that pendulum as well as anybody in the nation, getting into Dillon Gabriel, who, oh yeah, by the way, as I said, had supreme command of this offense already, and I think that's awesome to see. He's going to be such an intriguing player to watch moving forward, and that familiarity is a big reason why. Look, Oklahoma did a phenomenal job in the transfer portal getting these players. T.D. Roof was someone I saw making plays. Tawee Walker was someone I saw making plays. Jeffrey Johnson, Jonah Luulu. I mean, how many different ways do you want to go about this? Key Lawrence, who wasn't their transfer portal acquisition from this year, but was a year ago, is going to be a dude in that secondary. And that gets me to the last area I'll talk about when I'm talking about on-field takeaways, and that is that Oklahoma secondary. Many of you know I'm supremely high on Billy Bowman. I loved the ability he had coming out of high school to be successful at so many different areas on the football field, but he seems very settled in at that safety position, and I think he and Key Lawrence are going to be a dynamic duo back there if that's the duo we see. But regardless, you saw some things out of the secondary for Oklahoma that give you some reason for excitement. Some plays were made, and yes, the receivers had a good day for Oklahoma, but the cornerbacks were in good position a lot of the time. And one thing we need to remember, this is spring. The offense has inherent advantages at this point because real pressure can't be put on the quarterback. But inevitably, exiting this spring game, I didn't see anything that would give Oklahoma fans cause for concern. And all I saw was a justification for the excitement they had. And what we saw with all that people packed in that place is that right now, there's so much intrigue around Norman. Not only from a national perspective, there's a reason why I keep talking about it, but also from a home perspective. It's one of the coolest things I've seen in a spring game, maybe ever. So with all that being said, hop down in the comments. Can't wait to hear what you had to say. Can't wait to hear your takeaways, and we can talk about it down in the comments. That's it. See ya.